While the marketing teams at John Deere and Case are busy convincing farmers that their new $500,000 tractor is the absolute pinnacle of evolution, a massacre is happening right behind their backs. The soundtrack to this massacre is the roar of cheap, brutal engines from YTO, Dongfeng, and Lovol. China didn't just knock on the door of the global agricultural market, they kicked it down and started aggressively choking out Western brands with their pricing. And while the monopolists laughed at these primitive tin cans, the Chinese massively bit off their market share. How did a country that was plowing fields with hand hoes 70 years ago force the global giants to step aside? Let's rewind the clock. The 1950s. China literally couldn't feed its own population. Fields were worked by hand with hoes, just like 1,000 years ago. A tractor wasn't just a luxury, it was science fiction. Only a handful of people had ever seen a machine like that. Today, however, China is one of the largest producers of agricultural machinery in the world. Its machines harvest crops on every continent. The logical question arises: how did a country with no engineering schools and no heavy industry become a titan? After the revolution, communist China was a backward agrarian state. No factories, no technology. So they took the easiest and most cynical path. They started copying. The first Chinese tractors were, down to the last bolt, stolen Soviet machines. Their first mass-produced model in 1958 was the tracked Dongfang 54, which translates to "the East is red." This was an absolute carbon copy of the Soviet DT-54. It was assembled at the first tractor works in Luoyang, under the strict supervision of engineers from the USSR. The same blueprints, the same design, the same mechanical flaws. Just how big was the cult around this machine? Imagine this. In 1962, this exact Dongfang made it onto the national currency. The 1 yuan note featured a woman behind the wheel. She was a real person, Liang Jun, China's first female tractor driver. For hundreds of millions of poor peasants, the tracked machine on the banknote wasn't just a picture. It was a symbol of a well-fed future. The tractor literally became a state religion. But for China's massive construction projects, much more powerful equipment was needed. Thus appeared the Hongqi 100 red flag, which almost entirely copied the heavy Soviet Stalinets S-80. However, these massive tracked giants were completely useless for tiny rice paddies and cramped plots of land. China needed different solutions. Therefore, a factory in Tianjin soon rolled out the Tianyu 55 Iron Bull, a wheeled tractor copied from Belarusian MTZ models. Even the first small tractors of the now popular Xingtai brand were based on Soviet designs. And for the poorest peasants, they created the Gongnyong 7, worker peasant. This was a turning point, a two-wheeled walk-behind tractor boasting a whole 7 horsepower. Instead of chasing gigantomania, the Chinese began making equipment tailored to their own incredibly modest realities. These were the most primitive machines imaginable. Zero comfort, zero technology. The driver could barely stand after a shift due to the brutal vibration. But they had one massive advantage. They could be fixed right in the mud with a sledgehammer and a wrench. This wasn't equipment for corporate agribusiness. This was equipment for the physical survival of a nation. For decades, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, China invents nothing of its own. They just stamp things out. Millions of tractors and tillers. Simple, cheap, rough. The quality is wildly inconsistent. Comfort is absent. The metal is often soft. But they work. And here China does what many underestimated. It transforms machinery from a privilege of elite collective farms into a mass, accessible tool. It was this era of quantity over quality that laid the foundation for their industrial base. And then comes the turning point. Deng Xiaoping comes to power. He realizes a harsh truth. Endlessly copying outdated Soviet designs is a dead end. China opens up to the world and launches a brilliant scheme. Want to sell in our giant market? Build your factories here and share your technology. Joint ventures with Western giants begin. The Chinese stop simply copying parts. They begin to understand the engineering logic behind them. In the 2000s, China steps onto the world stage. Players emerge who think globally. YTO Group and Photon Low Vol. Their main weapon? Price. A European or American tractor is expensive, it's premium. A Chinese equivalent is half, sometimes a third of the price. Moreover, the Chinese started playing the right to repair card. This is a massive pain point for Western farmers. While John Deere owners are suing for the right to simply plug a laptop into their own tractor to clear a software error, the Chinese operate on a different principle. Broke down? Here's a part for pennies. Change it yourself, even in the field in the pouring rain. No software locks and paid subscriptions to unlock horsepower. But their price advantage isn't just cheap labor, it's hardball geopolitics. The Chinese government poured billions in subsidies into its factories for years, effectively paying them for every tractor exported. The goal wasn't simply to make money, the goal was to execute massive price dumping. Remember how these budget tractors conquered emerging markets? It was a brilliant logistical scheme. They didn't arrive in shiny showrooms, they came disassembled, packed in cheap metal crates. Farmers bought them and assembled them in their garages, like a Lego set for adults. The cheapest models, the so-called moto tractors, ran on a simple belt drive. An exposed belt looked like 19th century technology and often snapped right in the middle of plowing. But a new one cost pennies, took 5 minutes to swap out, and the tractor kept moving. It was the perfect compromise for a farmer who was walking behind a horse just yesterday. But the most interesting stuff is happening right now. If you think a modern Chinese tractor is still that same rough tin can with a rubber belt, you are deeply mistaken. Today, it's GPS navigation, complex electronics, sealed cabins with climate control and automation. And they aren't stopping at diesel. Right now, China, drawing on its colossal experience in making electric vehicles, EVs, is actively testing and bringing fully electric tractors to market. While Western brands are only hauling pretty concepts to trade shows, the Chinese are already preparing to stamp them out by the thousands. Just visualize this leap. On one side, 1958. A driver swallows dust, goes deaf from the roar of a stolen engine, and pulls with all his might on the stiff iron levers of a tracked Dongfeng Hong. On the other side, the present day. A modern farmer stands on the edge of a field with a tablet and watches as a futuristic driverless Chinese tractor flawlessly seeds hectares of land, guided by satellites. China has already flipped the global smartphone and electric vehicle markets upside down, and now it's doing the same thing in the mud of the fields. So the next time you see one of these small machines on a local farm, remember, you're not just looking at a cheap tractor. You're looking at 70 years of the most aggressive industrial evolution in history. Do you think China will eventually crush giants like John Deere? Or will they never surrender the premium segment? Drop your predictions in the comments.